Hello there, Chris P. Williams here from Friday Studios. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through fixing teeth and changing eye color in Affinity Photo. I'm just going to do a quick apology. I've got a stinking cold and a sore throat, so apologies for the deep voice. I hope it doesn't put you off. Our model today is Jane. I'm sure she's not going to appreciate this video because I'm going to be pointing out a few little flaws in her smile. We can see here on the left we've got a little bit of tooth decay, and on the right we've got a missing tooth. And what we're going to do today is rebuild these teeth and do a quick dental job, correct a few blemishes, and then whiten the teeth. So let's crack on. I'll tackle this tooth on the left first, and to do this I'm going to use the lasso tool. That's a case of pressing the shortcut L, and we're just going to roughly cut out this tooth in front, and we're going to create a new tooth from this. We're going to reshape a tooth, rebuild it. So I'm just going to press Ctrl and C to copy and Ctrl and V to paste, and now we've got a new layer with our tooth on. And we're going to use the move tool now just to drag this across so it's roughly in place. A little bit of rotation. I'm using the line of the lip as a guide, and I'm going to lower my opacity now just so that I can see the tooth underneath. Now I can see here I need to bring this edge of the new tooth in line with the old tooth. So I'm just going to drag that in using the move tool still. And I can see that I've got a nice line, and I can see as well that the tooth is actually overlapping the lip there, which would look a little bit odd. So I'm going to raise it up to a realistic level. Now, how high you create the new tooth is dictated by the teeth that are already in situ, and you can see, you can more or less make out a natural curved line from here to here to here. So I think about there looks about right. I can see my edge is still in line with the existing tooth, maybe a tad in, and I think that is looking good. Let's have a look at the outside edge, and I can see where the old tooth lies, and this area here, this tooth would naturally go behind the tooth in front, so I'm going to overlap that slightly just so that it disappears at the right angle and at the right depth behind this tooth that's in front. And I'm quite happy with that, so I'm going to go back to my opacity and raise it just a little bit slightly. So I'm going to press the eraser tool now, which is here, and it's E on your keyboard, and I'm just going to use the eraser to get rid of this excess tooth overlapping the lip, which I don't need, and I'm going to erase in front of the tooth where the existing tooth lies, and I'm just going to take the edge off the bottom. Now the brush is a little bit soft now because I'm going to erase around the front edge. We need a little bit of sharpness, so I'm going to increase the hardness of my brush to about 73 will do, and we'll return to erasing. I'm going to just reduce my brush size. That's the left bracket to reduce your brush size. And we can see there, we're just taking away that edge. Increase my hardness. And now I'm going to increase my opacity to full 100%. And Control and D to get rid of my marching ants. And I think that's looking pretty good. There's still a little bit of residue around here which we need to erase. So I'll just take care of that now. Okay, to fix the tooth now just at the bottom end here, we're going to make sure our tooth layer is selected. Okay, to fix this tooth a little bit further and make it sit a little bit nicer, we're going to go into the liquify persona, which is the next button across from the photo persona. And in this instance, we're going to be just using the third tool down on the left, which is the push forward tool. I think the shortcut for that is P. This is very much a case of working to your taste. I'll reduce my brush size and I'll see if I can fix this corner here. And I think that looks pretty good to me. We'll pull this down ever so slightly, just so that the tooth actually covers the area of the little bit of exposed tooth. And I think that'll be good enough. We can fix any other errors later on now with the erase tool. So once we're happy, we can commit to those by pressing apply. And we'll go back to my eraser tool, and I'll just take the edge off that tooth there. And I think that's looking pretty good to me. And we just need to reveal the tooth in front. And I think that about does the job for us. We'll remove that layer just so you can see the work we've done. There's a little bit of overlay there which we can get rid of. Turning a layer on and off is a good way of identifying which bits need to be erased and which bits don't. At the top of the lip here we can see there's a little line of the copied tooth overlapping the lip, and I think we're good to go. Okay, I'm just going to zoom out again, and we can see here we've more or less completed that tooth. It's looking pretty good, and we can now go to work on the tooth on the right. Now I'm going to flatten this layer. I wouldn't ordinarily, but just to keep the video running smoothly, I'm going to right click and merge down, because I'm quite happy the way that tooth is looking. Okay, and we're going to duplicate now this tooth by pressing L for loop, and we're going to roughly select that tooth. Wow, that's very rough. And yep, that's good to go. And Control and C and Control and V. And now I'm going to move that tooth in place by selecting the Move tool. The shortcut for that is V. And we're just going to repeat the process that we did on the other side. Lower our opacity so that we know where we're going. And I'm going to move this tooth around slightly again, using this area of the tooth that's remaining. That's going to be our guide regards to our starting point. And I'm just going to rotate this tooth slightly so that the angle's very similar. And we'll reduce the size because obviously this tooth is further back, so it will be a slightly smaller. And I'm going to raise that up again, looking at the natural line. I think we're about there, maybe a tad longer. Okay, and I'll increase the opacity, and we'll go back to the eraser tool, and I'll just drop my opacity again slightly just so that I can see the line of the tooth in front. And we're going to erase this area here. So I'm going to increase my brush size slightly using the right bracket, and the hardness is 14, which is acceptable. And we're just going to slowly work our way in. You could, of course, mask the tooth, but just for the purposes of the video, I'm just going to use the erase tool ever so gently. And I think that's looking pretty good. So just keep looking for the edges of the tooth we just created. Again, there's a lot of residue over here from the copy. We made the selection was just a little tad too big, maybe. Well, not maybe, definitely. And I'm going to increase the opacity now to full, and we're going to turn that tooth on and off. That tooth layer on and off, just to see how that fits. Now, I think we can take away a little bit more of the gum there. Looks a little bit more natural that way. Maybe a tad more. And I'm going to increase the hardness of my brush, not all the way to 100 because that looks awful, just to take the soft edge off here. And again, I'm not too concerned about this, because what I'm going to do next is I'm going to use my Gaussian blur filter in Affinity Photo to slightly blur that tooth, because it is further back in the image, but not a great deal. So we're just going to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and we'll drop that down just so it looks a little bit more natural. And we'll apply that. Now the other thing that's sticking out is that tooth is a little bit too bright for our purposes, so we'll fix that while we're here, and we'll do that using an adjustment layer. And we're going to go to curves, and what I'll do is I'll just drop the overall exposure on that tooth. You can see it's affecting the whole image at the moment because I haven't actually clipped the adjustment layer to the pixel layer that we're working on, which is a tooth. So to do that, you just simply left click the adjustment layer, drag it over the pixel layer that you want to correct until you get this blue bar, and then just let go. And now you can see the curves layer is only affecting that tooth. So if I bring it up or bring it down, that looks like a very, very bad rotten tooth there, but not quite as rotten as it was. Now I'm going to raise it up slightly, and you can see what we've done here. We've just decreased the overall exposure, more in keeping with the tooth that was there, and I think that looks pretty good to me. So I'll commit to that. Before I do, I'll just use my erase tool ever so slightly, a little bit too much there. I need to lower my hardness. And I'm going to zoom in, and it's just to take the edge off really from this tooth. And there you go. I think that's a pretty good job. I'm not a professional dentist, but I try my best. So now we can commit that layer. I'll merge it down, and we can look at colouring these teeth. Right, before I actually do go into the colouring, I'm going to correct a few blemishes, and to do that I'm going to use frequency separation. Now if you want to know a little bit more about frequency separation, you can see my other video on my channel that goes into that in a little bit more detail. So we go to duplicate our layer, Control and J, and we'll click on filters, frequency separation. The default setting is pretty good for this kind of job, so I'll leave it as is. And first thing we want to tackle are these little blotches on the front, so we'll try it with the high frequency layer first. Select the clone stamp, out click in an area to the right of a tooth, and just click and copy. And you can see there it's done a pretty good job, but it's not perfect. So we're going to go to a low frequency layer now. Press L for the lasso tool, and I'm just going to select that blemish, and I'm going to go up to filters, and you can see here we got repeat Gaussian blur Alt and F, which is very useful. So I'll close that down, and we'll press Alt and F, and you can see it's repeated the last Gaussian blur we used, which is a little bit soft. So we'll go to blur, Gaussian blur, and increase that quite a bit so that that blemish disappears, and we'll press apply, and we'll repeat that process here, and again select the area, and we'll go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, because the last blur was obviously too large. It took into account a much wider area that captured a bit of a lip, but you can see now that's disappeared nicely. Okay, and we're just going to look at this second spot. We're going to go back to our high frequency layer, select our stamp tool, and reduce our brush size, out click an area adjacent, and we'll paint that out. And it's done a pretty good job. There's a little tiny blemish here. I'm going to reduce my brush size and see if we can remove that, which it has, and I think overall it's looking pretty good. Now over here where we copied that tooth, we can see a line here which it took from the original. Just to make them look slightly different, I'm going to out click to the right of that line and increase my brush size using the right square bracket, and we're just going to see if we can paste that out, clone that out, sorry. There you go, that's done a pretty good job. There's something happening here, a little bit of saliva there that's catching my eye, and also here. So again, on the high frequency layer, drop my brush size, out click to the right of it, or to the left of it, sorry, and away we go. We'll remove it that way. We'll do an out click here, and go to the lasso tool. Maybe I'm getting a little bit fussy here, but And we'll zoom out, and I think that tooth is looking pretty good to me. And we're just going to be working on this top pixel layer. I'm going to keep the other layers just so that we can return to those at any time, just to see how far we've got. Right, now we're going to look at fixing the colour of Jane's teeth. And to do this, we're going to quite simply use our lasso tool, which again is the L key, which is a shortcut. And I'm just going to roughly select Jane's teeth. And don't worry too much about capturing some of the lip, because the technique I use is only going to affect the yellow color channel and leave the reds in one piece, hopefully. Okay, so we've selected our teeth, and I'm now going to use an adjustment layer. And that adjustment layer is the HSL hue, saturation and luminance. And I'm just going to click on that. I'm going to left click the layer and clip it to my pixel layer beneath. And it's only going to affect this particular layer, and it's only going to affect the area inside the selection, inside the marching ants. So I'm going to go to my drop down menu and select yellow. And we're just going to reduce the saturation. You can see what's happening to the teeth. The overall colour is changing. Now if you go too far, it looks a little bit false, a little bit white. It's not really what we want. So you've got to accept there's going to be a certain amount of coloration to the tooth, which is only natural. And I think about there would be pretty good. And I'll commit to that just by pressing the cross. And now if we turn that layer off, you can see we've corrected the slight discoloration in Jane's teeth. Now this area here again is still looking a little bit obvious, but you could have corrected that quite easily in the frequency separation section of this tutorial. But I'll leave it for now, because overall the result is quite good, and it gets across the point that you can alter the colour of teeth just using the HSL and selecting yellow. And I think that's as far as I'm going to go with regards to touching up Jane's teeth. And now I'm going to Control and D, and pressing the space bar to get my hand tool, I'm going to drag up, and we're going to look at Jane's eyes. Now Jane's eyes are beautiful, there's nothing wrong with them, but what I want to demonstrate now is just a quick technique really for colouring eyes, and we're going to try and make Jane's eyes blue. So before I start, I'm going to Control and J again just to duplicate my layer, and I'm going to use my elliptical marquee, and I'm just going to select around the eye. You don't need to be too accurate again, because we're going to delete a little bit later on, and don't worry about the eyelids and the eyelashes. So we've got two eyes, so we've got to make two selections. We're just going to make sure our add to selection is pressed, and it's in the top left here. You can see add, subtract and intersect, so we're interested in add. And I'm just going to select the second iris and pupil, and again, like I said, there's no need to worry about capturing a bit of the eyelid and the eyelash, and I'm quite happy with that. And we're going to press Control C and Control and V just to bring those to a new layer. Okay, we've got our both eyes on the one layer, and we can now press Control and D to deselect, and we're going to go back to the hue, saturation and luminance adjustment, and we're going to first of all make sure our blend mode is changed to color, and this means it's only going to affect the colors underneath the selection. And again, we want to left click and clip it to our pixel layer, which is the eyes, and we can now start making our adjustments. Now the hue shift panel here is how we're going to change our eye color. You can get some pretty psychedelic colors moving this from left to right, and like I said, what we're after is a nice blue, although aquamarine there looks pretty nice. So I'm just going to take it to the right, and that should give us a natural looking blue. And don't worry too much about the brightness, because we're going to fix that using the saturation shift here. and if you take it all the way down, it disappears. Take it all the way up, it looks a little bit too extreme. But you can adjust this to taste. If you just want a really crazy, whacked out, hyper psychedelic look, then pump it all the way up by all means. But I think that looks like a natural blue eye to me, and I'm going to commit that by pressing across. And now what we need to do is just go into our layer and use the erase tool, and we're just going to erase the excess overlap on the eye. And I'm going to increase my brush size using the right square bracket, and I'm just going to delete that blueness there. The hardness of a brush is at 12, which is pretty good as for a erasing job like this. It's good to get into a habit of erasing slowly, letting go, erasing slowly, letting go of the mouse button, and then if you do make a mistake, you don't have to go back so far. So erase slowly, let go, erase slowly, let go. Or you could be really clever and make another selection of the pupil and iris, and then you won't have this issue. But if you left click, erase, let go, and it's a little bit more forgiving, so we can be a bit rougher here because it's nowhere near the eye, and we're just gonna move across there, and we're looking good. We've now changed the eye color on that side. We'll take the edge off this edge here, and I think that looks pretty good. We'll go over, repeat the process on the right eye. I know you're gonna get fed up with me saying erase and let go, so I'll stop saying it now. You've got the idea. Sorry. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's just take that away. A little bit too much there. I'm just going to zoom out now just so that we can see the overall effect, and you can see there it's done a pretty good job of changing Jade's eye color. I'm just going to remove that layer, and you can see the effect we've had. I think the saturation is a tad too much still, so we'll return to our hue, saturation, luminance adjustment, and we'll reduce that saturation slightly further. And I think that does the job nicely. Now before we move on, I'm just going to use my spacebar and hand tool to center the eyes. I'm just going to do a quick shadow and highlight adjustment on this layer, making sure my eye layer, my eye pixel layer is still selected. Go to adjustments, shadow and highlights, and the shadows aren't really going to have much of an impact. If I move into the left, you can see it affects the image. Again, we haven't clipped the adjustment layer yet. I'll do that now, just by left clicking and dragging, and we can now bring out the contrast in the eyes, because they were quite dark to start with around the edges, and I'll drop that slightly, ever so slightly, and we're going to increase the highlights now just to bring out these catch lights in Jane's eyes. I think that's looking pretty good, and yeah, I'll commit to that. And again, what that's done for us here is we can see where the layer is still visible on the edge of the eye. So I'm going to reduce my brush size, go back to my eraser tool, and I'm just going to take that edge off the eye there, off the iris, sorry. And we'll take a quick look at the second eye just to make sure that's not the same, and we're looking quite good now. Okay, and that's it really. We've managed to color Jane's eyes, whiten her teeth, and fix her teeth. And that is the video. I hope you found that useful. If there's any kind of work you'd like me to go through on Affinity Photo, please leave requests in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to assist you. And it's goodbye for now until I see you the next time. Thanks very much.